Thank you very much. I would like to focus my comments on algorithms. Okay, we've talked a lot about data and algorithms. I want to focus specifically on them because I think they're important market players in this digital economy, and I think because they raise intriguing issues. So the algorithms are the tools that turn data into information. They can do it by using many ways, some of which you all know about: machine learning, deep learning. They can also use very simple decision trees. So they differ very much. They also differ in what they do. They can help us in search. They can help us in identifying the relevant information. They can help us in matching. They can help us in determining prices, quantity, and other values. And what they do is they use input data. Okay, they then analyze the data in order to reach a certain decision to which the certain specific algorithm is attuned. So one point to make here is the connection between the data and the algorithm, which I think is important, because the better the data, of course, the better the analysis, and also the better the data, the better the algorithm, because the algorithm can learn. There's a feedback effect between the data and how it was analyzed, which can feed back into the algorithm. Another point here is with regard to transfer learning, because we can train our algorithms on one set of data and then transfer that learning into another set of data or to do a different task. And this implies, and if you want I can go into this later, this implies that you can train it in China and then have it applied on consumers elsewhere. You don't necessarily always need the data in a specific jurisdiction. This is a fact which affects, of course, comparative advantages in this international world. So given this, very rough introduction of what algorithms are, let me make 4 short points with regard to algorithms and antitrust. So the first question is, do algorithms help us coordinate? And we have here the expert, or that opened the door to this question, Ariel and Maurice, in their incredible book. Who hasn't read it should read it, Virtual Competition. And they asked the question of whether and how algorithms can actually coordinate. And this is an extremely important question, and I'm really happy to report that I think that the discussion now is going, the international discussion on this question is now going into its next level. Because I just came back from London, where I chaired a session about algorithms and coordination. And there were different economists from all over the world discussing their own models of whether this happens or whether this doesn't happen. And there are really smart people involved in this discussion. Some think that algorithms do not change anything, but many of them have proven on experimental, using experiment, that algorithms actually matter, at least in some, conditions. And I think that one interesting way to think about it is to think about the 3 Stigler conditions for coordination. Okay, reaching an agreement and detecting deviance and remedying it or punishing it. And if you think about it, algorithms might affect each of these 3 different conditions. Let me give you just a few pointers. This is a very big subject, but going back to the work of John von Neumann, who is the father of computer science, he actually, when he talked about algorithms, he said, algorithms, you can think about them as recipes for action, okay? They tell us what we do with the data, okay? And also, if firms can observe the algorithms, they can then know what the other firm is going to do. So in a way, think about it. It's a way of reading the mind of your competitor. You don't actually need to talk with him. All you need to do is observe the algorithm, and then you will know what the outcome is going to be. This is one thing. Another thing, and actually Moshe Tenenholtz and others have shown that when algorithms actually are transparent, all you need is a one-shot game. You don't actually need interactions because you know how your rivals are going to make their decisions. And another thing that algorithms can assist us is that we know that coordination can break easy when you do not know when the other one deviates from what you agreed. However, if the algorithm is sophisticated and smart and can use a lot of information, it can better detect why a firm has deviated, whether this is because the market conditions have changed or because of something else. And one last thing to think about here, and there are many other points I don't have time to make, but just pointing out things here that I think are we should think about. There's a very interesting experiment which was done by DeepMind, and they actually showed that algorithms have learned to encrypt their own messages so that only the algorithms could understand them. So think about enforcement in such a world. Think about detection by the authorities once you have algorithms encrypting and deciding when to encrypt their own messages. First point. Second point, let's take it to the legal realm, okay? Because coordination doesn't necessarily mean that this is illegal, right? I mean, we have laws. We decide whether this is an agreement or isn't an agreement. And it's important to start thinking about whether our tools are fit for purpose or not. And let me just give you a few pointers here as well. Some cases are easy cases. There's a poster cases in the US and in the UK where the algorithms were used as tools after firms decided to coordinate. That's an easy case, okay? I mean, nothing new under the sun. However, I mean, we want to tackle the more difficult cases. So that one way that I suggest to think about is think not only about the algorithms, but also think about the digital economy around them and how firms are affecting this digital economy. So one way to think about it is through facilitating practices. So is the algorithm made transparent, and is there a good reason for consumers that the algorithm would make transparent? Or how are you training your algorithm? Are you training it on the exact same data set as your rivals, even though you have a better data set? So these are the kind of questions I think that should also be raised in this regard. And last point, there's an interesting case that is cited many times that was raised by a former FTC Commissioner, Maureen Olhausen, and she said, if we can put the word, if the algorithm can, we can interchange it with a guy named Bob, then we have a really easy way of dealing with it. And at first I said, this is brilliant. This is really a simple test. But if you think about it, it actually doesn't work. Because once you go to machine learning, which means that the algorithm teaches itself what to do and it determines by itself whether it wants to collude or not, then it's very different from actually a person deciding to do that with another person. So this is the second point. Third point goes to self-help. This is something I really like. I do a lot of in my own work because I think, before we go to regulation, we really need to think deeply whether markets can work, whether markets can solve some of these issues. So think about algorithm for matching. There are many algorithms for matching, and they do ranking. And some of the ranking is not necessarily doesn't necessarily always give the best solution to the consumer. Or think about algorithms who do price discrimination. I mean, is there anything that consumers can do before we go to regulation? So one thing that Neva and I suggested is the use of algorithmic consumers. Some call them virtual butlers or digital butlers. And the idea here is very simple. The idea is that we, as consumers, we can use algorithms in order to beat other algorithms, or in order to deal with some of the negative effects which are created by algorithms used by suppliers, especially large suppliers, in the market. And so these algorithms, they identify the need, they search for the optimal result, and they automatically execute it. So it's actually, okay, automation and shopping. And how can they assist? They can assist, I mean, they have a lot of advantages and risk. I'm not going to go into them, but let me just talk about very shortly about market dynamics. First of all, if many consumers use the same consumer algorithm, the algorithm can use buyer power and then maybe counter-react some of the effects of supplier power. They can also maybe limit discrimination, because if an algorithm buys 200 units of a certain thing, but it doesn't, and the supplier doesn't know who this is for, then this creates a smoke screen with regard to the information, with regard to price discrimination. Okay? So what are the antitrust implications here? First of all, we have to think about buyer power in this realm. We have to think about access to consumers. What are the gateways in this industry? And access to data. Who controls the data which is needed for these algorithms, and whether and under what conditions we want to share. Okay,
One